It's very hard to move forward in a dynamic environment if you don't know where you've been. And it's the history that tells the story of who came here and why did they come here and how did this city evolve, or any city evolve. And we tell that story visually through architecture, through historic buildings, remembering always that a building was designed and built for people. And so the stories of the people that occupied those buildings, that worked very hard in their various trades, is a reminder of how the city evolved. And sometimes there are lessons to be learned from the mistakes that were made over time. Every city is going to make mistakes. And so preserving our past is also a picture book for those that are coming here. The culture of the Hohokam started in about 1000 AD and lasted for about 450 years, and didn't have horses, didn't have metal tools, and they built these canals and they engineered them. And even today, engineers will tell you that you couldn't make any improvement on what they did. Nobody's quite sure what caused them to abandon this. Probably drought, climate issues could have caused that change. The Native Americans are very good at managing land.
Charles Christmas Sr. was born in Hopkinsville, Kentucky. He heard about the Mormon Church and he joined the Mormon Church back in the 1830s. But along around 1877, he thought maybe there's rumor to this truth about there being level farmland with an ancient canal system in the territory of Arizona that we could go and exploit. And so he petitioned Brigham Young to come down here. And so Brigham Young says, well, yeah, it's kind of getting hot for us polygamists. So we need a place in Mexico and we need a place, along the way.
And so the first group came down in 1878, and it was an incredibly perilous journey. You cannot imagine how difficult it was. We're talking no roads, no bridges, and your oxen, horse-drawn or oxen-drawn wagons, doing it on foot. And they finally reached the valley, and the conclusion was, this looks a lot like Mexico. Why don't we just stay here? Mexico was still quite a distance away. So the first group that came settled in Lehigh.
One evening as the sun went down and the jungle fire was burning down the track.
For this area, they came here as pioneers and there was nothing here, nothing. And they worked and scrapped with their hands and hard labor and made the city we are today.
The famous quote there was their leader, Daniel Webster Jones, said, well, give me people who are so poor that they can't afford to come back.
And then another delegation came down a year later, and the folks in Lehigh said, we welcome you, but there's just not enough room in this floodplain to accommodate everybody, but we think there's good potential up on the hill. So they settled up on the Mesa.
May of 1877, my mother's family, my maternal side, left Utah in a pioneering wagon train, and it came to the Salt River Valley, which they knew where they wanted to come, and it took them about 87 days to come here. Then they started working here and getting water to the Mesa. So that was on my maternal side.
If you're going to do agriculture, you want it to do close to the Salt River, and that's when they began to see the remnants of the old Hohokam prehistoric canals, and began to look at the canals, began to dig them out, and really assess the potential for agriculture. And that was the reason for, in addition to trying to spread the religion, they were here for agriculture. Everything was laid out, and it didn't take long to transform a scrub brush desert into a thriving agricultural oasis. And citrus was in a very dynamic mode. Surprisingly, Mesa was also a wine growing center. The Mormons shunned wine, but they didn't mind growing it, the grapes to make wine. From there, people began to start to move in, and the population grew very, very slowly. I think at the turn of the century, there might have been 300 people here.
I do remember my father telling me that as a boy, he rode his horse to school. So he rode his horse to this elementary school, Lehigh School, and then his mother, my grandparents, to school to here. And so I was looking to see if any of them were in the pictures. And then I had the opportunity to go here for a couple of years to elementary school. So I know there's at least 3 generations that went to school here.
Railroad was introduced into the valley in 1887 when it came through Tempe, and a couple of years later it came into Mesa. The thing that really helped Mesa grow was the construction of Roosevelt Dam. Mesa was the closest to the dam site, so that's where all the materials would come. Goods and supplies could be shipped to Mesa and then brought up by horse and wagon to the Roosevelt Dam site. So you had people that were working on the dam, companies that were supplying materials. That really helped Mesa grow and be put on the map. It's one of those things that time now is moving so fast that you can go away for a week or two and come back and go, I don't remember a building being there. I mean, Mesa now is about the 32nd largest city in the country.
And I think when I was a young man, I think our population was about 35,000. Mesa was really small. So today, Mesa's 520,000. So I've seen it grow from a more agricultural footprint to commercial, retail, industrial, and manufacturing. And it's been a blessing. I mean, we grow because we have the water and the capacity. Well, Mesa has a lot of attributes. Number one, it's a family-oriented city, great neighborhoods. Spring training is going on. We have the Oakland A's and the Chicago Cubs. As the mayor, I am the face of Mesa, Arizona, and so I have the responsibility of representing our great city.
Hopefully, a discussion like this gives a different perspective to history. We look at old buildings and we go, oh, they're kind of interesting. What were they used for? And as I said earlier, these buildings were all designed by people, essentially for people. And who were the people that were in these buildings? What were their lives like? What did they do to contribute to make a community what it is today? And hopefully everyone, wherever you're from, can begin to understand that and look into the place that you live and really develop an appreciation for what it took to get there. Something we didn't talk about that's really very interesting is the Mesa Cemetery. Over 35,000 burials. That's larger than the city of Prescott. And if you start walking through, you're going to see the whole history of this city in the monuments and memorials that are scattered around that cemetery, and begin to understand these were real people that gave their lives and talents to building this city. And if you gain nothing more from this, develop that understanding and appreciation.